Hi, I'm Twyla with My Bilingual Life. This video is specifically for teachers. So one of the things that you may not realize is that I have a lot of resources that I've made for teachers. Today, I want to specifically talk about a resource that I have for free available for you on Teachers Pay Teachers, teaching about Martin Luther King Jr. Now, I've created a series of biographies that can be used in a dual language classroom. So I have English and Spanish. If you're an English elementary teacher, you can use my English resources. If you're a Spanish speaking elementary teacher, you can use them. If you're a dual language, you have both. I was a bilingual teacher and I didn't often have resources that were the same in English and Spanish. So in our school, we were supposed to teach social studies in the language of the day. So that sometimes meant that my English was on one subject and my Spanish days were on another subject. These resources mean that you can stay on that same subject all week and just change the resources. This free resources, you'll get both the English and Spanish versions. You can choose either the printable freebie or the Google Slides version. So first is a one-page reading passage. It's rather simplified, so it does not go into all the details of Martin Luther King Jr.'s life, but it's a very simplified biography for younger elementary students. Next, you'll get a vocabulary activity, which will be a fill in the blank with some of the vocabulary words. There's a comprehension activity with some comprehension questions. There's a sequencing activity with some of the events from that person's life that you can put into order. Graphic organizer that you can have your students fill out, or you could do it together. And finally, a writing activity. All of these activities are available in English and Spanish. So let me go over some of the questions that I've gotten about these resources. First, who can use these? Ideally, these were written for first to fourth graders. First graders are going to need a little bit more help with the reading. Fourth graders should pretty much be able to read this independently. However, if you have language learners, either students learning Spanish or students learning English, you can use these with them at any age. That's the interesting thing about language is the age is a little different depending on what they've learned in the language. I've used these in my adult classes. You could use these in your high school Spanish classes or your high school ESL classes. Look at the reading passage and see if it fits your learners. I created these specifically for use in a bilingual class. So you can use these in your immersion classes, in your dual language classes, or if you only teach a class with just one language, that's okay too. I also offer these as bundles with English and Spanish, or you can purchase just one if that's all you need. You can use these as a whole class instruction. You could use it for online instruction. I've used it personally in my online classes. You could use it in small group settings. You could even put it as a center activity. So you can be flexible on how you would like to use this in your class. I've actually had lots of teachers say these are great substitute activities. So you can decide exactly how you'd like to use them. So how long do you need to teach this? Well, that depends on how you want to use it. You can do it all in one morning, one afternoon. It is going to take, if you do all of the activities, it's probably going to take a couple of hours. I suggest using it over the course of a week, doing one activity a day. You could easily spread this out over a whole week. So look at the activities. You do not have to do all of the activities. I've given you a variety of activities that you can choose from. So pick and choose what works for you. So could you use these as guided reading? Yes, these are great activities to use for guided reading. And I would teach them pretty much the same way in the guided reading group as I would in a whole class, but I could scaffold it more to that group's needs. One of the things that I like to do is, if you use some of my other biographies, is I would assign each group a different person that they studied, and then they would present that to the class. So it was a great way to incorporate their small group learning into whole group learning. I have a whole pack of Black History Month, Women's History Month, and Hispanic Heritage Month biographies that you could use for this. You could split them up among the groups and have a couple weeks of activities easily for your guided reading groups. Could you use these in a dual language classroom? Yes, that's why I created them. I didn't have enough equitable resources in English and Spanish to be able to teach my class. And this was one of the things that I wanted to provide for teachers. So if you have a language of the day, you can focus that week on Martin Luther King. You could read the passage in English one day. You could read the passage in Spanish the next. You could do the vocabulary in English one day and the vocabulary in Spanish next. So they're made to be equitable. Some of the vocabulary words are a little different on some of the biographies, but for the most part, they're very equitable resources. So you could teach Martin Luther King throughout the whole week. Could this activity be used for older students? Yes. I used it in my adult ESL classes. In fact, these biographies have the added benefit that if the adults in your ESL class are studying for the citizenship exam, they're learning some of the US history points that they need to know. You could specifically choose the people that are on the test. I did not create these as test prep for the citizenship, but there are some topics that are covered in the citizenship exam. This serves a double benefit for your adult ESL students. So now let's go through how I would teach this. In my classroom, I would do the vocabulary activity first. I would have the students work through, figure out what the words meant. And for my younger students, I would have them find that and find those words in the reading passage. Next, we would read this. Now, there's multiple ways of reading a passage together. You might read it to your students. You might have some of your students read. You might have them all read it independently and then read it together as a class. There are multiple ways, and I'm not going to get into that part of this right now. I would probably do the comprehension questions next. I like to give the comprehension students to the students as they're reading so that they kind of know what they're going to be looking for. There's a sequencing activity. My younger students liked to cut and paste the squares from one page to the other, or you could just have them put the numbers and number the events. But my younger students like to cut and paste. There's also a graphic organizer. You can either have the students fill that out. If you're doing small groups, that would be a great thing, is to have them fill out that graphic organizer as they go. You could also do it as a whole class activity. So that's another option. The writing activity is something else you could do. I personally did the brainstorming page with my students. We thought about some different reasons why this person's important, and we wrote those down together. And then each student individually wrote their paragraph. So you have some options here. You do not have to follow anything step by step, but you can easily just teach through page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4. There's also answer keys for everything. So you choose which ones you want to take a grade on. If you want to take a grade, that's totally up to you and your situation. I personally have used these in my online learning. I did a lot of tutoring during the pandemic era, and we would work through some of these biographies. In a 30-minute class, typically we could get through the vocabulary, the reading passage, and the comprehension questions. And then I would give them the writing assignment as homework. You can pick and choose which items you want to go through and which fits your class best. I've had lots of great reviews on these. I've used them myself, and my students have really enjoyed learning about different individuals. Make sure you download the free Martin Luther King biography. Use it before the holiday. And if you like these activities, I have many more available on Teachers Paid Teachers. So check them out, and you could use these for Black History Month, for Women's History Month, for Hispanic Heritage Month. And I'm working on adding more biographies in between. So let me know what you think. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them down below. And stay tuned for more teaching resources from my bilingual life.